Heavenly Father, Yahweh, this is Colin Michael Hawkins, asking to come before you, Father, along with all the body of the priests, Father, as we come before you as seed of your last day's witness, Yisrayl Hawkins, and through your Son, Yeshua Messiah, the high priest of your great house. We thank you, Father, for the things that you've given to us, and we ask for your understanding, your peace, and your comfort, and your blessings be with us, Father. We do thank you for our great and beloved overseer, Yisrayl Hawkins, Father, and ask and pray you be with him and strengthen him as we, being your seed, coming through you, Father, to you. We bless you. We thank you, Father, also for our great high priest, Yeshua Messiah, your only begotten Son, Father, the one who has set the example for us and made the way where we can come before you, Father, and seek your knowledge and your understanding of your holy and righteous word. We ask and pray you'd help us now as we rehearse these words and bless our understanding, Father, for we ask these things in Yeshua's name. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Please be seated, men. Yeah, let's see. I think we left off on page, well, we're going to start off here on middle of page 198, I think. No, let's back up to 197 here. I just want to read this paragraph in the middle of page 197. It says, "This is the long-range plan of Yahweh in making man in his image, after his likeness, to form many of them into a kingdom of priests that will rule as Yahweh." You know, that's so incredibly awesome when you think about it. We're going to rule as Yahweh. You know, he is the creator of the entire universe. And he's given us the opportunity to be able to become like him and be as he is. He's going to form this kingdom of priests that will rule as Yahweh. That is, according to his 613 laws, statutes, and judgments, and which will govern this righteous kingdom forever. They will be given tremendous power and authority. Power and authority to rule. Not only the nations, bringing them under control. You know, that's just going to be the start of things, is when we start bringing the nations under control here on earth. But the Malachim also. They will have great power and authority to rule under Yahweh and Yeshua. You know, Yeshua will be the high priest. He'll always be over us. And as it says here in Revelations 4:11, "You are worthy, O Yahweh, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created." Okay? Because it's only by Yahweh. Yahweh allows these things to exist. Now, he talks about the Malachim. You turn the page here, 198. In 1 Corinthians 6, verse 2 and 3, he says, "Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world will be judged by you, are you not competent to judge trivial matters?" You know, so the world, he's talking about the saints now. The saints are going to have that power. Now remember, Yeshua has been given all power and all authority of judgment, right? But the saints are going to receive that power. They're going to receive that authority from Yeshua the high priest. Because it's the priest, remember, he says, go to for the difficult matters, for the learning of the laws, go to the priest and learn these things. So this priesthood that Yahweh is forming through us, that we're training for, these will be the ones who actually judge the world. And if the world would be judged by you, he says, are you not competent to judge the trivial matters? You know, these little things that don't really amount to anything. Do you not have the ability to be able to use your mind and to use the things that you're taught, to put down the cardinal inclinations, to do wrong, to want to hold a grudge against someone, to want to lash out at someone or have evil feelings against someone? You're capable of doing that. Do you not know that we will judge the Malachim? We're actually going to judge the Malachim. If they do something that is forbidden, they will be judged, and they will be sentenced, and they will be gotten rid of out of the kingdom of Yahweh. Because remember, the gods are no longer going to exist. They're going to be destroyed. So how much more the things that pertain to this life? How much more the things that pertain to this life are we allowed or should be able to judge? Now, it says here on 199, the word judge in the previous verses here is the Greek word number 2922, in the Greek dictionary of Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, and it's derived from 2923, and it means, as it shows here, in 2922, it means a tribunal, to judge, or judgment, okay? And a tribunal is a court of judges. it comes from, it means to judge, and comes from 29:23, which this says that this word comes from 29:19, which means to distinguish, to decide mentally and judiciously, okay, to condemn, to punish, to judge, so, and to call into question, to sentence, to think upon. All of these things are things that a judge does. You know, you distinguish. You have to distinguish between what is right, what is wrong. You have to distinguish between the clean and the unclean. You have to distinguish between whether someone's telling the truth or someone is not. And so you have the ability to do this. Remember, Yeshua was able to discern the thoughts of men, right? He was able, through their actions and looking at them, to be able to discern whether they were speaking the truth or whether they were trying to lie their way out of something. And so this is what the ability that you will have and what you will be doing. Now it says, please notice the word also means to condemn, to punish, and to sentence. So this power that Yahweh grants to the sons of Yahweh over the Malachim and over all its creation, it's absolute and it's righteous. Okay, because it's absolute, meaning that there's no way that you're going to be able to defy this authority that's set forth. And it's righteous because it's according to Yahweh's laws. No way that we will judge will ever be anything outside of Yahweh's laws. It will always be according to Yahweh's laws. And it's going to be strict. Remember, we're going to strictly follow those laws, and it's going to be according to Yahweh's laws of peace. Because that's what we're going to do, is we're going out to bring peace throughout the world, through all the nations, and then eventually throughout all the universe. Now, most of Yahweh's plans have been kept secret from the majority of the Malachim and mankind as well, you know. But some of the Malachim, however, who know more than the majority, have been allowed to really put Yahweh's called out ones through tremendous test. Now, First Kepha, it says, let's see, First Kepha 1. It says that Yahweh's plans have been kept secret from the majority of the Malachim. In First Kepha 1, let's see, verse 10 says, concerning this salvation, the prophets have inquired. Now, concerning salvation, so we're talking about the ways to obtain salvation. Concerning this salvation, the prophets have inquired and searched diligently. And remember, like Daniel could not understand it. No matter what he did, he could not understand it. It wasn't given to him. But they searched diligently, who prophesied of the mercy that would come, esteeming the closely things of which, okay, the commandments and so forth. Now, if you look down at verse 12, he says, to them, referring to the prophets, to them it was revealed that not to themselves, but to, as they were ministering the things which now have been reported to you through those who have preached the message to you by Spirit Holy sent from Yahweh, things into which the Malachim earnestly long to look. Okay, so the Malachim do not understand the plan of Yahweh. Not all of them. Some of them know more than others. It's only to whom Yahweh reveals certain things to. You know, certain ones did know certain things because he used them. He sent them to do certain jobs, to perform certain jobs, to send to people. But the Malachim are earnestly looking, they're desiring to know what Yahweh's plan is. So, and I think the King James says that they stoop down to look into it. So, he says the majority have been allowed, but he says more than the majority. Okay, and when you think of that, the majority, it's like, how many Malachim are there? You know, I mean, there's just billions and billions and billions. You wouldn't even know the number of them. But remember, they outnumber the demons 2-1, right? Because 1/3 of the demons fell, 1/3 of the Malachim fell, but 2/3 remain. A tremendous amount. One figure gives you millions times millions, you know, but that's just a figure of a huge number not really an accurate number. It's not meant to give you an accurate number, but it's just giving you an idea of how much is there. So some know, and some have been used to bring forth tremendous tests, as it says. Okay, they have been. They have even desired to destroy the house of Yahweh completely. So these ones who come and are allowed to come into test have actually wanted to destroy the house of Yahweh, because they know. Remember the jealousy that sets in. They're jealous because of the fact that they know that what's been promised to be given to mankind. Well, mankind will be able to become like Yahweh Himself. Now, out of the jealousy, Satan tried to do that, right? She wanted to be like Yahweh, but she went about in the opposite way of what Yahweh said. The only way that you can be like Yahweh is to be like Yahweh, okay? If you go try it any other way, you're not going to be like Yahweh. Yahweh's total righteousness, okay? He loves to serve people. He loves to provide protection. He loves to show you what is righteous and give you health and teach you the right way to go. Satan didn't want that. She wanted the authority and the power, to be a certain way. But she didn't want to go the righteous way. She just wanted the power and the clout that came with it and the prestige and stuff that came with it. And she wanted to grab things for her own self rather than sharing things. But of course, with everything that Yahweh has made, this universe that's out there, why did He make it? He made it for you. He made it for you. So you could go and experience the great blessing that there is of seeing all the wonderful things that He has created, and to share the joy of life itself, living. That's why Yeshua said He came to give abundant life, remember? That you may live more abundantly. So He made it all for us to share with us. Now, they want to destroy Yahweh's house, but it's only been with Yahweh's protection that the house of Yahweh has existed. I mean, think about it. How could you be alive today? How can Yahweh's house even exist today? It can't, unless Yahweh protects it, right? You have to have Yahweh's protection. It's with Yahweh's protection that we're able to be alive. That's why the house of Yahweh had to be established in the super nation, the top nation of all nations. It had to be established here in America, because this is the only place where any country that you have the protection to be able to do this. If you talk about anything and rise up against something and speak about the evil of things in any other country, you'd be arrested and thrown away and put away. And so the work of Yahweh could not exist. It could not carry on. But here in America, we have that freedom to do so. Even as it's restricted as it is, we still have certain freedoms that Yahweh allows. And the reason why these certain freedoms have been taken away and the minds of the people have been blinded and so forth is to test us, to make sure, are we going to strive to endure? Will we trust in Yahweh and use the amount of freedom that we have to do what we need to do? And that is to publish the word of Yahweh, get it out there to preach and publish it. Now, the scriptures show that in every time period throughout history, Yahweh had to protect His house from extreme persecution until His people successfully accomplished the prophesied work that they were called out to perform. And that's what you read in Revelations. When you read about the different eras of the house of Yahweh, it tells you the different things. And Yahweh says, to him who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in my house. And He says, in each one, He says, to him who overcomes, to him who overcomes, to him who overcomes. So they were all persecuted. And He did, however, though, allow certain persecutions to befall His people in order to prove His chosen, either fit or unfit, as kingdom, to be this kingdom of priests. Because He's got to test us. He has to He could have made us perfect, but He didn't do that. What would that do? It'd be no different than the Malachim. He made the Malachim. But He didn't make us that way. He made us in a certain way, and we're flesh and we're blood. We're a different type of species. Like it says in Corinthians 15, there are certain types of glory. There's one glory of one particular star. There's a glory of another particular star. There's a glory of one animal. There's a glory of another. There's a glory of man, and so forth. There's different bodies and things that Yahweh gave into us. One flesh is not the same as another flesh. A fish doesn't have the same flesh as an animal. You eat a land animal, you got to kosher kill it and bleed out the blood. You take a fish, you can take a fish and go ahead and cook it up. You know, there's a difference between the different types of animals and stuff that Yahweh has made. But there's different flesh. The flesh of a fish is totally different from the flesh of an animal, you know. So he made all of these things different, and he made mankind a certain way, but he gave us the capability to think. Remember, that's what it talks about in Genesis. Man is has the ability to use similitudes, to think, to consider, to make comparisons, and to make decisions, to be able to do what is righteous. So he goes on and he says, now the house of Yahweh is hated by the gods. The slaughter of Yahweh's obedient servants by the gods and the God worshippers started with Abel, the first righteous priest, and the killings of the saints have not stopped into this present day. Now the hope of the gods has always been to completely destroy the house of Yahweh. And Lucifer knew the plan of Yahweh. And she also knew the plan that Yahweh had to build a family of beings. And that's what turned her. You know, she began to think about that. But he plans on building a family of beings in his likeness, who would rule as Yahweh rules in complete righteousness. Complete righteousness. You notice that? Complete. There is no such thing as halfway righteousness. You know, there's no such thing as being, well, a little bit righteous, a little bit evil. You know, that's a mixture. But in Yahweh's plan is complete righteousness. And Lucifer also knows that Yahweh's plan includes putting an end to all rebellion throughout all the universe. Putting it out. Now think about it. As we go through, you know, right now, they know and they're looking forward to the Savior's coming and saving them and giving peace to their planets. And when we go out and we teach them and we show them the peaceful solution, show them how to be able to have this peace and how to maintain this peace, you know, it's going to be such a joy to see these things and to know that this section of the universe has come to, you know, peace. But what Satan noticed, what she is unable to understand, however, now is that the only way a peaceful atmosphere can be created for everyone, including Lucifer herself, is to bring all ambitious, ruthless beings and all those who want to war and fight into the subjection of Yahweh's laws of peace. But she can't understand that, see? Yet she still selfishly wants the world to follow her way, even though her way brings nothing but trouble. She can't understand how that can possibly take place. Now remember what it says in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 3 and 4. It says, but if our message is hidden, it is hidden to those who are lost. For the gods, the Elohim of this world, and by Satan, have blinded the minds of those who do not believe. They don't believe. And because they don't believe, the light of the message and the glory of the Messiah, who is the image of Yahweh, should not shine into them. So by being blinded, by their eyes being blinded, their minds being blinded, they can't see and understand that message that Yeshua taught, which was to humble yourself and to be obedient to Yahweh and to keep his 613 laws. So it's hidden. It's hidden to them. Well, how is that done? Well, if you remember what it says in Romans 6, 16 and 17, he says, do you not know to whom you yield yourselves servants to obey? His servants you are to whom you obey, whether of sin which leads to death or to obedience which leads to righteousness. But I thank Yahweh that though you were once ignorant of this, you know, then you became obedient and your heart was turned and then you began to know Yahweh. And notice what it says. And you have become obedient with all your heart to the form of teaching which was delivered to you. So these gods blind the minds of the people. Why? Because it tells you, if you're a servant of Satan, you're going to do the works of Satan. Well, how are you going to do the works of Satan? Because that's what you've been taught. It's through these teachings. It's through the teachings that the churches and the religions of this world have done. That is why the people are the way that they are. It's because they have been taught these things. They've been taught this way of life. They do what they're taught, and by doing what they're taught, they're serving Satan, and they belong to Satan, so their minds are blinded and they can't understand these things. So therefore, they themselves are like Satan. They can't understand that they have to forget all of this, put it all away, and turn and submit themselves to the laws of peace. Well, that's what Yahweh does when He calls a person. When He calls you, your mind is open, and then you realize that you put these things away. You remember, like Shalom said, when I was a child, I did things as a child. When I was a man, I put those childish things away. Well, when we grow up in Yahweh, and we understand and He opens our minds, then we realize that we've got to submit ourselves to these laws of peace. And then, when you do that, you're no longer serving Satan. So you're no longer a servant of Satan, so therefore your mind's no longer a mind blinded and clouded. Now your minds are open to the understanding, and then you can see that you have to submit yourself, and then you see the joy that there is in submitting to Yahweh. So that's why Satan can't see these things. Now Abel started the house of Yahweh, remember. Abel was a righteous priest of Yahweh. He was a priest who offered sacrifices and offerings to Yahweh, and Yahweh recognized his righteousness by accepting his sacrifices. In Genesis 4, verses 1 through 7, he says, Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I brought forth a man with the help of Yahweh. Okay, so they realized that Yahweh is the one who gave life. Then she bore again, and this was some time later, she bore again, and this time her brother Abel was born. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And on one of Yahweh's Sabbaths it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to Yahweh. And Abel, besides, now notice, Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. Okay? The fruit, the ground, the earth, the world. Okay? His offering was from worldly ways and worldly understanding. Abel, on the other hand, besides bringing an offering of the first fruit of the ground, also brought an offering, notice, the sacrifice of offering of the flock and of the fat, and Yahweh honored Abel and his offerings. Now, in Proverbs 27, Proverbs 27:23, it says, Be diligent to know the condition of your flocks, and give careful attention to your herds. And that's exactly what Abel did. Abel was diligent to pay attention to the flocks. And he paid careful attention to the herds. Okay, so he watched to see how the people were. He knew that what's being told here is that Abel looked at the condition of his flock. He knew the condition that his flock was in. He knew where they were at. He knew their righteousness. He knew that they were ready to be able to be presented to Yahweh. And that's what he did. Remember Moshe? Remember the calling out of the saints, the names that we did here at the house of Yahweh, which is a pattern that which was written, that Moshe did the same thing as he called out the names of the people. This is what Abel did. Okay? He brought these people before Yahweh. He presented these people before Yahweh. He knew the condition that his flocks was in. Remember Yeshua said in Luke 12, verses 31 and 32, he said, but rather seek the kingdom of Yahweh, then all these things will be added to you. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's righteous pleasure to give you the kingdom. So the kingdom is going to the flock of Yahweh's people. Okay, it's his people that he's talking about here. So Abel brought these people his offerings. And he says, but Yahweh didn't honor Cain and his offering, and Cain became angry, and his countenance fell. Okay? Countenance is the expression on his face and his feelings that he was feeling. It fell. He got depressed, And so Yahweh said to Cain, why are you angry? Why are you angry? Why are you so downcast? If you do righteousness, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do righteousness, well, then sin is crouching at your door, and the desire to sin is in you, but you must overcome it. You've got to overcome your test. If it's presented to you, if it's at the door and it's shown to you, if the door is open and says, look, here's your sin, get rid of it, this is what you've got to overcome, Cain, then if you do that, then you will be accepted before Yahweh. You remember what it says in Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore I appeal to you, brothers, by the mercies of Yahweh, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to Yahweh. That's what he just said here. He says, if you do righteousness, will you not be accepted, Cain? If you become holy and present yourselves to Yahweh, like Abel did, he presented himself to Yahweh and the people. Notice, he says, if you offer yourself become holy and as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to Yahweh, which is your reasonable service, and do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's what Abel did. That's what these people did, but not Cain. Cain hung on to the world. He just brought his fruit of the ground offering of the earth. He still had that worldliness in him. But renew yourself in your mind that you may be able to test and to prove what is righteous and acceptable in the perfect will of Yahweh. Notice you have to be able to be tested and proven. And that's what he was telling them. He says, look, if you do these things, then you will be accepted. But sin, the desire to sin is there, but you've got to overcome these things. Now, according to Gesenius, Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon of the Old Testament by Samuel Tregelles, on page 773, it shows the phrase that of Abel, talking about a keeper of sheep, that this comes from word 7462 and means teacher of righteousness. And it's shown there at the top of page 291. Teacher of righteousness. Notice, figuratively, to pastor, okay, to govern, to rule, as a teacher of virtue. And like it says, the lips of the righteous will feed many. You feed many by your words, by what you speak, the teachings that you bring forth. Lead to virtue, and teacher of virtue and wisdom. And the Reader's Digest, Great Encyclopedia Dictionary on page 1498 tells you that the meaning of the word virtue means the quality of moral righteousness or excellence. The quality of moral righteousness or excellence. That sound familiar to anybody? Huh? The quality of moral righteousness or excellence. Now, the phrase used for Cain here, the tiller of the ground, in Genesis 4:2, that word is 5647, and Gesenius shows that it means servants of the gods and man. Notice, to serve any idol, or to serve gods or idols, okay, and to worship God and idols and so forth. To serve or worship God with the offerings and the sacrifices. Now, in Genesis 4, as you continue on, verses 8 through 11, he says, now Cain, and it shows that Cain was a priest of God or the gods. Cain talked with Abel, his brother. Now remember how Satan tempted Eve. When she tempted Eve, she said, you will be as the gods, right? This is the way to go. You will be as the gods. Well, Cain chose that way. Now, Cain talked with his brother, and it came to pass, now this is about 128 years later. Remember, they were about 128 years old. It came to pass when they were spread abroad. That don't mean that they put on a lot of weight, you know. What it means is that their work spread out, you know. Cain had his people, Abel had his people, and there was a work that was going on out there. And Cain rose up against his brother and killed him. Now Cain may have not necessarily have done it himself. You know, he could have hired someone else to go and do this for him. But he was the ultimate one who was responsible for it. And Yahweh said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said to them, I do not know. I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Well, he should have been. You know, he should have known what his brother was doing, and he should have been following him. He should have been keeping what his brother was teaching, is what he's saying. And he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. You know, as the blood of Abel went down into the ground, then of course those microbes that were in it, remember the life that is in the blood, communicated. And Yahweh would have known what took place. And so now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened his mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. So that's the way that he chose. He chose to go that way. And when he did, then, of course, he chose a life. It was his whole life that he put before him, that he chose to receive nothing but curses the rest of his life. Now, a person who follows Yahweh's 613 laws, as Abel did here, then they don't bring harm to anyone, to no one, and no thing. No, not to themselves, not to others, and not to their environment. Okay, they take care of things because the 613 laws of Yahweh teaches peace, and peace comes from everywhere around you. Okay, you can't break these laws of peace and think that you're living okay and yet not show love to your brother, or not show love to yourself, or not show love to your environment. Ruin your environment and you're not going to have peace. You're going to suffer from it. That's not peace. Peace is to live totally free and in complete peace and harmony with everything around. Remember, one of the words is harmony, is the meaning of peace. And to be at harmony means you work together. You take care of the earth will take care of you. Now, Abel taught these things and he practiced this peace. And those who followed him also practiced the same laws of peace that he taught and practiced. Yet Abel's own brother killed him. Now, why would anyone want to kill someone who teaches perfect peace? Why? You know, since Abel, there's been many other righteous teachers. You know, you read about Yahweh's servants. You see that they kept Yahweh's covenant of these 613 laws, statutes, and judgments. You know, all the prophets of old. You had Eob, you had Eliah, you had Yeshua, you had the 12 apostles. They were all teachers of righteousness. Not one of them ever caused harm to another. Yet those of the world, everyone who knew them, but were of another faith outside the house of Yahweh, they wanted to destroy them. And they persecuted. Hebrews 11, verse 30 to 37 says, by the faith, the walls of Jericho came down, and they have been encompassed for 7 days, remember. So, remember, they were told, be quiet, go around 7 days. On the 7th day, when you blow the shofars and you shout, the walls are going to come crumbling down. And they've even done studies and stuff, and they know that, they said, well, there's certain sound waves, as the waves go out, could cause enough vibration to be able to bring those walls down. Of course, Yahweh already told them what they were going to do. But whatever laws of nature, or what's out there in the original, that Yahweh uses to make something come to pass, is up to him. But by faith also, the harlot Rechab, okay, she didn't perish with those who didn't believe when she welcomed the spies with peace. And what more shall I say? For the time will not tell me of, Gideon, Barak, Samson, all of these ones that he mentions. Now, let's see, he covers this back here, right? Yes, okay. We'll get into that a little bit here. Okay, these all follow the same faith, okay? The faith that Yahweh gave to Moses, okay? Moses, come on down. Maybe he said, come on up. Up here on the top, Moses. Follow me. Didn't y'all see the Ten Commandments? Huh? Okay. So, Moshe, he was given the same faith. Remember what Yada says. Yada says that this faith was once and for all given. Once and for all. It was only given one time for all people and for all time. Okay? And this is the faith that Yahweh gave to Moshe. And the same faith that Abel lived by, the 613 laws of Yahweh that he gave in the beginning. Let's look at Hebrews 10, the whole chapter here. He says, now, verse 1, the faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. That's what faith is. Faith is something that is substance, that you can hope for something, and it's the evidence of things not seen. You have the faith, you believe without seeing, and you know and trust in Yahweh that something's going to take place. And that's what these people did. Now remember, they didn't receive salvation yet, but they did the things that would qualify them for it. Remember, they're waiting for us. All creation is waiting for the revealing of the sons of Yahweh. Verse 2. For by it the men of old obtained a righteous report. Through the faith we understand that the worlds which were formed by the command of Yahweh, so that those things which are not in evidence are now coming to pass. Yeah, they're now discovering these planets and things that are out there, you know. You know, they already know that over 100 billion planets could be, habitable places could be right here in our own Milky Way galaxy, you know. And that's just one little tiny little speck. But the worlds that were formed, it shows that there are worlds that Yahweh formed. There's creatures, there's beings out there that we've got to bring this message to. By the faith, notice. And that's one thing it talks about. It says the faith. Okay, not just faith, but the faith. Showing you there's one particular thing that he's talking about here, and hopefully we'll get to that in a moment. But the faith that Abel offered to Yahweh, a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, because which was testified of him that he was righteous. And Yahweh testified of his gifts, though it being dead, yet speaks. Okay? In other words, his testimony is still alive. The things that Yahweh worked with Abel with is still alive. And it still speaks of his righteousness. Even Yeshua spoke of him. Through the faith, Enoch was conceived or converted in order not to see death. For he was not doomed to destruction, because Yahweh had converted him beforehand on account of the conversion, that he was obtained testimony to have well pleased Yahweh. You know, that's one of the things that the Christians get stuck on, is that Enoch was taken to heaven, you know. It doesn't say anything like that. It simply shows that he was converted, he was used in that work. For without the faith it's impossible to please Yahweh, notice. For he who comes to Yahweh, first you got to believe that he is Yahweh, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him, okay? He's a rewarder, and you've got to believe that. Now, we don't go to Yahweh just because we want something from him, you know, that we're looking for some reward because of our work. But you've got to believe that he is Yahweh. You've got to believe that he is the creator and who he is. And then realize that he rewards us with righteousness. To know what righteousness is, that's the greatest reward of all that you could ever have. To know what righteousness is, and to be righteous, because then you're like Yahweh himself. Because of the faith, okay, Noah, being warned by Yahweh of things not yet had seen, was moved with reverence in building an ark, right? In making that, for the saving of his house, by which he condemned the world and became heir of righteousness, which is by the faith. Now here's Noah, okay? And by faith, Noah built that ark, and he saved, there was only 8 righteous people on the face of this earth. 8 righteous people of how many billions of people? Or trillions of people that had been alive. 8 righteous people. And of course, Noah took the writings of Abel and the teachings of the house of Yahweh, and he preserved these things for future generations. By the faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place where he would afterwards receive for an inheritance, he obeyed and he went out, not knowing where he was going. Hey, Abraham, get on out of here. Abraham, I don't know, maybe he got lost in the wilderness, I guess. He didn't know where he was going, did he? That's the way the Christians look at it. They don't have any sense to know what the scriptures say. Where did Abraham go? In Genesis 12, let's see, 12 and verse, let me find it now. See, if I had my book, I'd find it right away, right off the bat. He went to the teacher, is where he went. He went and built an altar, and he went to pray to Yahweh in the name of Yahweh. And he went, here it is, in verse 6. And Abraham, verse 1, he says, Now Yahweh said to Abraham, get out of your country, from your kindred, and from your father's house, to a land which I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. Of course, he didn't know where he was going, so he took off. But then notice where he went. And Abraham traveled through the land as far as the hill of Shechem, to the mighty teacher. To the mighty teacher. So he went to be taught is where he went. When Yahweh told Abraham in faith stepped out. He went to the teacher to learn what he needed to do in order to have salvation. How could he qualify for salvation? Because Yahweh had promised him, I'm going to make you, through your seed will come forth the Messiah. So by faith, he sojourned to the land of promise as a strange country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, and heirs with him with the same promise. And he looked for a city whose foundation, whose builder, whose maker is Yahweh. In other words, he was looking for Yahweh Shema. He knew the promise. Now, we read of that in the last book in Revelations about Yahweh Shema. Those who are blessed, who will be able to go into and enter into the city, but the unrighteous will be left outside, right? And through the faith, Sarah herself being also received strength to conceive seed. Sarah was old. I think she was, somewhere in the 90s? Today you could, if you're 29 years old, to have your first child, you're ancient. 29 years old, that's old for a woman to have a child. And then you get up in your 30s or 40s, you're risking it, woman. You're getting too old to have that child. And here's Sarah, in her old age, Yahweh opened up her womb, and she brought forth the child, according to Yahweh's promise. And that's why Yahweh did this, is to show you. Like, remember the messenger who came to him said, is anything impossible with Yahweh? Is anything too hard for Yahweh to do? You'll see this come to pass. And you see what they desired. Sarah, gave her handmaiden in hopes like, I want some offspring, And then Abraham, he says, well, Yahweh, can't you give the promise to my faithful servant here? He said, no, it's going to be of your own flesh and blood that this promise will be given to, and he will pass it on. Now, let's see, verse 12, and these all died in the faith, not having received the promises, notice, but having seen them afar off. Yet they could see them in their spiritual mind, they could see these things, and they were convinced of them. They knew, they believed, they knew these things, and they believed in them, and they embraced them, notice. And to confess that they were strangers or pilgrims on this earth. They knew that this earth, this world that they lived in, and the life that they were leading, it was just temporary. They knew and believed. Now remember, it just said that Abraham looked for the city, Yahweh Shema. Well, no flesh and blood is going to enter into Yahweh Shema, right? So they realized that, just like Eob, remember Eob said, I await the day of my resurrection, right? When I will be changed into a spiritual being. So they knew this long, long ago. This wasn't some new teaching that Yeshua came about or his disciples talked about, the resurrection and being a spiritual body. The patriarchs knew these things. They wrote about these things long, long ago. Okay, for these who say, those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they'd been seeking of the country for which they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. In other words, the country that they were looking for is Yahweh Shema, Yahweh's righteousness, his kingdom. And if they thought about the country from which they left, Egypt and Canaan and the land of the gods and so forth, they would have had the opportunity to go back. If they'd have thought, remember Yahweh said one of his laws is don't go back to Egypt, right? Don't look back and think about what you had in the world, because you turn around, you want to long for it and lust after it and go back into it. And that's what they say. That's what it's saying here. That if they'd have thought about where they came from, of the country area, remember Yahweh told Abraham, "Get out of this country is full of God worship. Get out of it. Had they thought about that, he could have returned back, and he would have never brought forth this promise of the promised seed. But now they long for a better kingdom, that is, a heavenly. Therefore Yahweh is not ashamed to be called their Father, for he has prepared a city for them. Yahweh Shema talks about that in Revelations. But by the faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. Yet he had received the promises, offered up his only begotten son. So he was tested in that manner, because he had waited long, and he loved that boy, and he knew that he was the one who would carry on after he died, because he was already old when he had him to begin with. But Yahweh tested him and proved him. Jump down to verse 20. By the faith, Isaac offered Jacob and Esau, blessed Jacob and Esau concerning the things to come. Remember, he passed on that blessings to them. And by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning on the top of his staff. So they knew the promise that was given to Abraham. Abraham passed this on to his descendants, and they carried this on. In fact, it says here that Joseph, by faith, when he was dying, spoke about the departure from Israel, and he gave instruction concerning his bones. Remember, he says, when I die, when the time finally comes for y'all to leave out of this area, dig up my bones and take them with you and bring them into the promised land. That's the promise. That's the faith that these men had, that they trusted in Yahweh. By faith, Moshe, when he was born, was hidden 3 moons by his parents because they saw that he was a beautiful child. He was such a beautiful baby. Don't that sound like all parents? Oh, he's such a beautiful, look at that boy. He's a beautiful child, No, it's not beautiful in that sense. That was some beautiful looking child that they didn't want destroyed. The beauty was that these people believed in Yahweh. His mother and father believed in Yahweh. They taught. Remember, his mother was one who raised up Moshe, and she taught Moshe these things. So when he was old, he would not depart from them. Remember, when he got older, he had a choice to make. Would he stay in the house of the Pharaoh and go with all the ways of the world? Or would he do what Yahweh raised him up to do, and that is to take and deliver his people out? So Moshe went through a lot of battles and stuff, with the cardinal mind, but he did what Yahweh said to do. By the faith, Moshe, when he became of age, he refused to be called the sons of Pharaoh's daughter. Notice, and he's choosing to suffer the affliction with the people of Yahweh. And think about it. That was a real test, because he had it. He was living the high life. He had it to where he could do whatever he wanted. He had the authority and the power. Being raised up in Pharaoh's house, he had anything that he wanted, but yet instead he chose to be afflicted with the people, because he knew that when he left, he was despised. The Egyptians said, get rid of that man. We don't want to see him. But he was motivated by a faith, the faith, to leave Egypt, and not fearing the wrath of the king, for as though seeing the invisible one, he endured. He knew Yahweh, he trusted in Yahweh. He didn't fear about what the king was going to do to him, whatever. He knew he had a job to do. Through the faith, he sacrificed the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch them. Now, it wasn't the fact that you just went and slaughtered this lamb and threw some blood up on the doorpost, and, that the fact that when the destroyer came through, you saw the blood, and, I don't going to go in there because it's got blood on the doorpost, But remember, the blood, it was the act, it was the faith of doing this. And then, of course, the blood had the microbes in it, so when the destroyer came, they could see the microbes that was there, and they could actually send them a message, this house, don't enter into this house, because these people have done what they're supposed to do. And then when they go to the next place and not see anything, and not see any signal of microbes or anything, and the blood not being there, and of course that's the ones they went in and destroyed. Now remember, this destroyer, once he's set out, that's it. There's no turning back. When this death Moloch, this death angel, is sent out to do a job, it goes out and it does its job. It kills, it destroys. And there's no way that you can turn it back, And so these people had, by faith, had to listen like, so you mean to tell me I'm going to go and slaughter this lamb? Man, I want to eat that sucker next month. And I got to go kill that thing? I'm going to go bring it to market and make a lot of money. But I got to kill that thing and take that blood and put it on my doorpost, and that's going to save me. Huh, Moshe? Huh? That's going to save me. Just sprinkle that blood up there and I'm going to be alive, right? Are you crazy? Well, they didn't listen. Some did not listen, remember. And you see the examples in the scriptures that when Moshe went to the land of Israel and he began to do these things, remember when the 10 plagues came, some of the Egyptians started thinking like, you know what? We've seen some of the things, the protection that Yahweh gave. We better be listening to this guy. And many of the Egyptians listened, and because of that, they were saved from these things. And remember, a lot of the Egyptians left. There was a mixed multitude when they left Egypt. And many of the Egyptians left with them to go. But it took faith to think that, hey, I've got to do this. And if I do it through my actions of following what he said to do, I don't know what that blood's going to do. I don't know how in the world this blood is going to protect me, but I believe it's going to do it. And they did it. Of course, the blood symbolized Yeshua's death. And when he put the doorpost, he put the blood on one door post, and then he put it on top, and he put it on the other doorpost. When the destroyer came, he came to the door and he passed over the door, at the time of Passover. And they were saved. They were protected. And this is what we see in the protection that Yahweh has given to us through Yeshua. And it symbolizes that protection. If we believe into the one who is sent, then the protection is there. Let's see, I better finish up this chapter, huh? Okay, through the faith he sacrificed the Passover, okay. Because of the faith, they passed through the Red Sea as though dry land. When the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. And they have found chariot wheels and stuff in the bottom of the seas and stuff in places, so they know that this is real. And they can't deny it. They know that it was there. And as it says, the Red Sea parted, and then that dry, warm air came, and it blew. Remember, it says it blew through the night. Yahweh took the whole night to take care of it. While the people, one of the reasons too is, of course, through the night he did that so that they couldn't see, and they didn't have to see with their eyes and all this. He wanted to test them. Would they believe that by morning time, when the light shone, that the salvation would be there and that they would be delivered. So he used a lot of symbols in there too. Okay, it says, of whom the world was not, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, and hid in the caves of the earth. And all of these, having obtained a righteous report through the faith, have not received the promise. So they obtained this righteous report, but they still didn't receive the promise of salvation through the faith. But Yahweh having provided some better thing for us, that they without us would not be made perfect. They without us. And even the apostles, when they wrote these things, they knew that, even the apostle Shalom, remember, he says, I fought the righteous faith, and I know that a crown awaits me, But at the same time, he knew that he wasn't just going to die and receive salvation. He knew they wasn't going to go to heaven or anything like that, He knew that the time would come, that prophecies had to come. And remember, they wrote these things. Like in Thessalonians, it says, when the sons of perdition would be revealed. They knew all this was for a future time. It was all written for a future time that would come in the last days. And they spoke about this in the last days. And they knew what the prophets had spoken. They knew what Daniel talked about with the last days, that these things had not yet come. And so they had to be persecuted. They had to persevere and go through the things that they went through. And that's why we have to go through the things that we go through. And we're going to have to live through. We don't think about it, but when part of our testimony is going to be that we lived through the nuclear age, that we were alive through this nuclear age. When these nuclear bombs go off, it's not going to be a pretty sight. I know everybody thinks like, oh yeah, let the war start, so we can get on out of here and see the kingdom come. You're going to see a lot of horrible, horrible, horrible things taking place. before any glory is ever going to come. Before any salvation is ever going to come. A lot of destruction, a lot of gore, and there's going to be a lot of troublous times that we're going to be tested with, to have to go through in order to see the overall result. Because you've got to hate sin. Now, all of these people, it says, mentioned in these above verses, they were righteous examples, which means they lived by the faith. They were loyal to our Creator and Heavenly Father by being obedient to the laws that He has given to us. And these righteous men and women remain loyal to Yahweh in the faith. The one and only true faith. Remember Ephesians 4, verse 4 and 5, it says, there is one body. Okay? There's only one body. There's not many bodies. There's just one body. And there's one Spirit. Okay? There's only one Spirit that Yahweh has, and one Spirit that Yahweh gives unto His people to give understanding. Just as you were called in one hope of your calling. One Father. One faith. And one baptism. It doesn't matter if you baptize 1 billion times out in the world. It means nothing. Okay? Absolutely nothing. You have to go through the baptism that Yahweh says you must be baptized with, and that's only one in the house of Yahweh. There's one baptism. There's one possible way that Yahweh says He will find that baptism acceptable before Him. And there's one Father, one faith. There's only one faith. There's no other way that you can turn that way. You can't have that mixture of righteousness and evil. There's only one way to go. Habakkuk 2 verse 4 says, behold, the proud, his soul is not right in him, but the just will live by the faith. That's the only way that you can live and be justified in Yahweh's eyes, is to live by the faith. So these Christian preachers, they claim to follow this one true faith, but Christianity doesn't follow the examples that were set by Abraham and by the patriots. They don't follow these things. That's why Yeshua said, remember, He says, well, you claim to be Abraham's descendants, but if you were the children of Abraham, you would be keeping the things that Abraham taught. But you don't do these things. So, while these Christians teach against the laws of Yahweh, they forsake them to live by the traditions of men that the prophets condemned. Remember, they condemned the worship of the Queen of Heaven. They condemned that ways. And Yeshua condemned the people. He says, you take the laws of Yahweh and you do away with the laws of Yahweh so that you can keep your own traditions. You're not keeping the laws of Yahweh. They made up all of these traditions and customs and things that they did because they knew that they weren't keeping the laws of Yahweh. They didn't want to keep the laws of Yahweh. So in order to, you can't take something from someone without giving something back to them. Because if you just take everything, there's no reason to live, right? So by them removing the name of Yahweh, they had to replace it with something. And by removing the laws of Yahweh, they have to give the appearance of righteousness, or the people would say, wait a minute, this is totally absurd. This doesn't make any sense at all. It's crazy. So they give something instead that's kind of like a mixture. They remove some and add some. And this is why Yahweh says, you will be cursed. You remember He says, if anyone adds or removes, then I will add or take away from you as well, and you will receive the curses of the plagues. So they took parts out and they kept some righteousness there, but then they added in these traditions to do away with the meanings of the law. So when someone read this, they would not even understand what the law of Yahweh was. And they gave all of their opinions and their own teachings. Remember what we read earlier. It's these teachings that went into the minds of the people that blinded, and they listened to it and learned it, and the gods are able to blind their minds and keep their minds. And they're able to keep them from following the faith, the one and only faith that Yahweh says it's possible to have salvation. All right, we're going to stop here on page 205. Okay, next week we can take off on page 205. Everybody go ahead and stand. We will close with prayer. Let's raise our hands. Mighty Heavenly Father Yahweh, this is Cohen Michael Hawkins. Ask and come before you, Father, through the body of priests, Father, as we come before you as seeds of the last day's witness, Yisrayl Hawkins, and through your Son, Yeshua Messiah. We do ask to come before you at this time, Father, blessing you and thanking you for all things that you've given to us in life. We thank you for your great blessings of bringing us here in these last days, Father, of showing us these things, that we can understand these things, and the hope that lies within us, Father, to be able to continue to strive towards perfection that you desire. We thank you for your mercy and kindness, providing all of our needs. We thank you for providing the things that you've given to us so that we can use them to your honor and your glory, Father. We thank you for the love that you put within our hearts and our minds, so that we can love your word and love your work and love one another, Father. And truly, we thank you for the tests and the trials that you put us through, Father, knowing that these things teach us to become as you are, and that they help us to bring us to perfection, Father. We bless you, we thank you, and ask that you continue to be with us, forgive us of our sins and our shortcomings, and help us as we strive towards a perfection, Father. Give us the peace that we need to continue on so we can make it through this week and get to your holy Sabbath day and soon your great and awesome feast, Father. We bless you, we thank you, we ask your protection upon your people, and go forth, and also for the healing and the strength of those who are afflicted and are suffering, Father. May you grant your people healing so that they can rejoice before you, Father. We bless you, we thank you, and we ask these things in Yeshua's name. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh.